What's up, everybody? Chris Pennell here. We're going with my quarterback tier rankings for week 11 of the fantasy football season. If you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let's dive right into it. And first off, I do want to mention we do have 4 teams on bye this week, but they should have no fantasy impact at the quarterback position this week. And if you are starting anybody from these teams, well, you're probably not doing too hot this season anyway. But without the Falcons, the Colts, the Patriots, and the New Orleans Saints. So like I said, not really missing too much there. Let's get into the S tier here. We have 2 guys and they're also playing each other. We have the Super Bowl rematch this week with Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. These are the clear-cut top 2 options this week, in my opinion, and they certainly belong to be in this S tier. Now, while the matchup for Patrick Mahomes is much easier versus the Philadelphia Eagles compared to Jalen Hurts versus the Chiefs do have the higher implied team total at 24.75. The 3-point favorites at home, and this game is going to be on Monday Night Football, so I'm extremely excited to watch it. It also has the second highest total of the week at 46.5. And with the tight spread, I'm looking forward to a really good game. But the Eagles are currently 29th versus quarterbacks. The Chiefs are 4th. The reason Hurts, despite the bad matchup, is going to be this high is because he just offers a skill set that no other quarterback really has. Now, there's a couple guys that can run the football, like Jalen Hurts, but he's been amazing through the air this season. 260 yards through the air and over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Also getting nearly 40 yards on the ground and close to a rushing touchdown per game. So the floor is extremely high, and that means the ceiling is also going to be very high for Jalen Hurts. These are definitely the top 2 options here. While Mahomes doesn't run the ball quite as much as Jalen Hurts, he's honestly not too far behind this season rushing yardage wise because he has been scrambling a lot. The design runs aren't even close, but the scrambles have been there, and it's going to boost his floor as well. Moving down to our A tier, we actually have a handful of players that's going to make it this week. But we have Tua leading us off for the Miami Dolphins. They have the highest implied team total of the week at 29.5, so there should be plenty with scoring opportunities versus the Las Vegas Raiders defense. 11.5-point favorites at home. And on the season, close to 300 passing yards per game, over 2 passing touchdowns, 8.6 yards per attempt. While he's not going to offer you any rushing upside, this is still an easy enough matchup. And when you have guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to get the ball to, it can make your life very easy. So he's definitely a top option this week. Lamar Jackson with his rushing upsides, put him in either the A or S tier. Cincinnati Bengals currently 19th versus quarterbacks on the season. While he's barely over 200 passing yards per game, he's getting 50 yards on the ground on 5 designed runs, and that's not counting the scrambles, and half a rushing touchdown per game. And we just saw CJ Stroud light up this Bengals defense. This game's going to be in prime time on Thursday Night Football. Ravens are at home, 25-point implied team total and 3.5-point favorites. Should be another good one to watch in the primetime games. Honestly, really good this week. We have the Super Bowl rematch, then we have the AFC North battle, which should be a great one. CJ Stroud comes up next, and I realize, yes, he's a rookie, and there's a couple other big names that he's going to be ahead of this week, but the dude is balling out. 291 passing yards per game, not really turned the ball over too much, 32 pass attempts, 8.3 yards per attempt. The completion percentage is a little bit low, 61%, but he has great weapons, and this is a great matchup, and the dude has been balling out the previous 2 weeks, and he went on the road in Burrowland in Cincinnati and beat them straight up, and that was great to see, and that was without Nico Collins. And the Cardinals are currently 19th versus quarterbacks. And like I said, Stroud has an allotment of weapons to get the ball to. And Noah Brown, Nico Collins, assuming he's going to be back this week, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. And the run game, while it worked last week, it's still not the best run game in the world. So they're going to rely on CJ Stroud. But love the matchup, 26-point implied team total. And this game actually has the highest total of the week at 47.5, and it's a decently close spread at 4.5 points. So this will definitely be a pretty solid game here overall for points. And up next, we have Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. And any single time he's in a dome or playing at home, he is going to probably be in the B and up tier, and good chance he'll make the A tier, especially in a good matchup, because Jared Goff has honestly been pretty solid this year. 280 yards per game, over 1.5 passing touchdowns, close to a 70% completion percentage. Obviously not going to get you the rushing yards, but this Detroit Lions team, it's good. And they have a high implied team total almost every single week. They're 10-point favorites versus the Bears, and they're currently ranking 27th versus quarterbacks. And then we have 2 studs here in Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, who are a little bit low on the list. I almost put them in the B tier, but I didn't feel right doing it. So the A tier, honestly, it's pretty long this week, but I don't think there's too much separating these guys. But the reason they're so low for me is just because the matchups are really tough here. The implied team totals are a little bit lower. So if you're looking at Josh Allen, well, he's elite for fantasy purposes. And if you watch that Monday Night Football game versus the Denver Broncos, you probably have a pretty bad taste in your mouth. He was still fine for fantasy purposes because he got you that rushing touchdown, and that's the upside that he has every single week. So he can never be lower than the A tier for me. But man, that was ugly. But this is a brutal matchup versus the Jets. They're 6th versus fantasy quarterbacks, allowing 14.6 points per game. And they opened up the season versus the Jets in prime time, and that obviously didn't go too well for the Buffalo Bills. So hopefully they get a better chance this time. They're not on the road. They're in Buffalo, 6.5-point favorites, 23.5 implied team total, but a really low 40.5-point over-under. And on the season, nearly 2 touchdowns per game, 260 passing yards, and obviously we know the rushing touchdown upside with Josh Allen. Now, he's not really running the ball too much this season. We're right around 20 rushing yards per game, so that kind of sucks. That seems to have taken a dip from seasons past. But whenever they're on the goal line, Allen is always going to be a threat. And then Joe Burrow, we love him. We know the upside. He can always get you 300 plus passing yards. We've seen that the past month now. But this is the absolute worst matchup you can ask for versus the Baltimore Ravens. They're currently ranking first versus quarterbacks, allowing 12.2 points per game. Now, Deshaun Watson was fine. I know Marlon Humphrey got hurt as well. We'll have to see the injury status on that, but Burrow's good enough, and he's got Jamar Chase, and that's always going to at least put him in the A tier, despite the poor matchup. On the road in Baltimore, though, in prime time on Thursday Night Football, where scoring tends to be a little bit low, that's my only concern, but they throw the ball a ton. And moving on to the B tier, I kind of got made fun of for having this guy so high not too long ago, and he's been going off for a month now, and now I feel like people probably want me to put him in the A tier, but he's going to be in the B tier for me. I just can't have every quarterback in the A tier. We already stretched it to 6 this week, and that feels like a bit much. But another good spot versus the Panthers, and while it might seem like a good matchup for Prescott specifically with how bad their defense is, they're actually allowing the 6th fewest points per game to the quarterback position, but they've just been so bad versus the run. I don't think that Dak or the Cowboys passing attack will have any issues with the Panthers. They have 26-point implied team total on the road as 10-point favorites. At some point, Tony Pollard is going to get some touchdowns. It's not going to be Dak Prescott throwing the ball or running the ball in around the goal line. I mean, the touchdowns have just been completely at Tony Pollard's favor. He was close last week a couple of times, but once again, they threw it to like a guy like Jake Ferguson, or it just doesn't go his way. But I still like Dak here. He's a very startable quarterback, but I don't like him as much as I did in previous weeks. Justin Herbert, just with the talent alone, has to be at least in the B tier. Don't love the matchup, especially on the road in Green Bay. They're allowing the 2nd fewest points in the position, 200 passing yards and 13.7 fantasy points. But when you have guys like Keenan Allen, who's a bit banged up, hopefully he's going to be good to go. Quentin Johnson had a good game, finally got into the end zone. Then Austin Eckler out of the backfield in the Los Angeles Chargers offense. It's good enough to put up a lot of points every single week, so he's still a QB1, although more so on the low end this week. And then Brock Purdy, while he doesn't have quite the name value as guys like Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, he's been pretty solid this year as a quarterback. And the 49ers offense is always going to put up points, and this is a great matchup versus the Buccaneers defense, who are allowing the 5th most points per game at 285 passing yards and 21.6 points to the QB position. They're playing at home, 10.5-point favorites, and like I said, a very high total. And 1.5 touchdowns per game for Brock Purdy, actually closer to 1.7. Not throwing the ball a ton, but 9.3 yards per attempt. And you have great weapons in George Kittle. Deebo Samuel's healthy again. Brandon Ayuk, CMC out of the backfield. So there's no shortage of weapons here. That will always keep him low-end QB1 viable in the right matchup. Moving on to the C tier, we have Sam Howell, who's been playing great football this season. Nearly 280 passing yards per game and 2 passing touchdowns. Middle of the road matchup here versus the New York Giants, but this Washington offense has been humming, putting up points, and Howell has been the leader of that. And they throw the ball a lot, 36.2 times per game, which is the most of any quarterback we have talked about so far. And to round out the C tier, I have 2 quarterbacks that are very similar, but Kyler Murray and Josh Dobbs, both guys can run the football. Kyler made his return last week, and despite Call of Duty coming out last weekend, they did pull off the win, so I'll give him a shout out for that. This game features the highest over of the week, like I mentioned, with CJ Stroud, 47.5, 4.5 point spread, 21.5 implied team total for the Cardinals. They did come in as the dogs on the road. But in his first game, 250 yards through the air, did not throw for a touchdown, had an interception, less than 60% completion percentage. But what we like to see is the rushing touchdown, 4 designed runs, and 33 yards on the ground. And the Texans are currently 25th versus quarterbacks. And Josh Dobbs, he has been about as solid as it comes this year. He's gotten a rushing touchdown every single game now, it seems like, for the past month or so now. Good matchup versus the Broncos. They're currently ranked 26th versus quarterbacks. While it doesn't offer you as much passing upside, right around 200 yards per game, he's getting you close to 40 yards on the ground on 4 designed runs. Like I said, the rushing touchdown upside has been there for him. Moving on to the D tier, we have Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. Liked him last week versus the Commanders. Their defense is horrendous versus the pass. And that's another pretty good matchup versus the Rams. I wouldn't say they're as bad. They're kind of middle of the road versus quarterbacks, like 18.7 points per game. I was looking at some of the PFF numbers on their coverage stats, and they're pretty much like dead last. So it's definitely a good spot versus the Rams, and this is a 1-point spread, 46-point over-under. So this game is kind of has sneaky shootout upside, in my opinion. So if you're playing DFS this week, which I do have a DFS channel, you can check that out. It's just my name, Chris Pennell, instead of Christopher. That game probably won't get as much love as it should, but the potential is certainly there. 2 bad pass defenses. And then we have Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And while it's been a pretty bad season for Trevor Lawrence owners, he at least has enough weapons and upside to where he's going to be viable. 23.5-point implied team total, which is the exact same for Geno Smith, and the numbers are pretty much the same on the season, so it wouldn't make too much sense for me to have them too much different in rankings. And to round out this D tier, we have Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams, and I would say he's got pretty similar upside to all 3 of these quarterbacks. And like I said, I kind of like that Seattle-Los Angeles game. It should be a bit sneaky this week, 22.5 implied team total for the Rams here. And Stafford is dealing with an injury, but expected to be back this weekend. And the Seahawks are currently 19th versus quarterbacks, allowing 260 passing yards per game and close to 20 fantasy points allowed per game to the position. Also playing at home here in the Dome, so don't have to worry about any weather. 260 passing yards per game on the season for Matthew Stafford. The touchdowns just haven't really been there. But hey, if you have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, good things can happen, so I don't mind Stafford here. And then the F tier, 18, 19, and 20. Not a specific order here, but this is how I have it. I have Deshaun Watson at 18, Russell Wilson at 19, and then Baker Mayfield here at 20. Hopefully you don't have to start these guys. Russell Wilson wasn't too bad versus the Bills on Monday Night Football. I believe he was 24 for 29, which honestly was a very solid game, and he obviously beat Josh Allen on the road in Buffalo, which is a pretty impressive feat. 23-point implied team total here versus the Vikings pass defense, who's allowing 18 points per game to the quarterback position, which is pretty much mid-pack on the season. He also offers you a little bit of rushing upside, so I'm fine with Wilson. Deshaun Watson, he offers you some rushing upside as well, close to 25 yards per game. I believe he had over 30 last week, and a big win versus the Baltimore Ravens. Started the game horribly, then finished 14 for 14 in the second half with a touchdown, and obviously the game-winning drive for the field goal. And it's an okay matchup versus Pittsburgh. They're not elite, but they're also kind of middle of the road versus quarterbacks, but they are allowing close to 270 passing yards per game. They're at home here, 21-point implied team total as the favorites. And then Baker Mayfield, well, we're kind of just out of options at this point, 15.5 implied team total, so I have no real expectations for Baker here, and they're allowing the 5th fewest points per game in the quarterback position. But the 49ers have been pretty poor versus wide receivers this season, so if we can just hook up on a couple of big plays with Mike Evans and a couple of touchdowns on the season, he's averaging 240 and 1.5. So the upside is there, but I don't love it, but that's why he's number 20. With that being said, that's all I got for today's video, so I hope you enjoyed. If you did, even if you didn't, make sure you like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new. We're close to 100. Appreciate you all so far. I'll have my running back video up next, and I'll see you all next time.